he's fired at the target, and I'm the other side of the wall, and they've come through the back of me. Friends of mine that were safety staff with me at the time, in a roundabout way, think that the target itself may have been pasted onto the wrong wall, hence why where I wasn't safe. But yeah, as it was, I ended up taking sort of several shots through my backside, which came out via my groin, hitting the femoral artery on the way, and then one through my shoulder. But whereas safety, we were also looking at their tactics and their procedures. We were giving them role play casualties, to test their sort of casualty evacuation. And so there was an air of confusion when this happened to me, because man down gets called and they think it's just another exercise casualty, until one of the other safety staff comes back out the building after the second room is clear and finds me with an arterial bleed laying on the floor, sort of screaming.
Just before this episode starts, if you enjoy the Legit podcast, we produce 4 exclusive bonus episodes per month for our private members club on patreon.com. For the price of £1 a week, that's just £4 a month, the price of a beer or a fancy coffee. We produce these bonus episodes that have special guests on, various topics, and there's also merchandise offers and various bonuses you can have, competitions, all kinds. Get over there, support us, support the podcast by giving just £1 a week. Link is below.
This episode of the podcast is kindly sponsored by Feel Supreme. Feel Supreme have been sponsoring the podcast for a number of weeks now. They're an incredible company. They've got the most diverse range of supplements. I've got some here, the CBD, which I've been taking, which is brilliant. The mushroom extract as well, which I've been taking once a day. They've got vitamin D3, vitamin C, a huge range of different health supplements, and you can get 10% off if you go to the code below, go to the link below, which is feelsupreme.co.uk/legit, and you get 10% off by clicking through and going through their website through that link below. Please support them. They've been a huge support of the podcast. They've got the most incredible products that I take daily, myself and Andy take daily as well. So anything you can do to support them ultimately supports us. Everything CBD, vitamin D3, vitamin C, which is obviously vitamin D3 massive at the moment, and vitamin C obviously really important for immune support. So go to the link below, click through, and you'll get 10% off your order. Brilliant. Right, so Legit Podcasts. Back over Zoom.
Back on Zoom. Mate, this week we have Mark Smith, 2-time Britain's disabled strongman, amputee footballer, and now author of a book. It come out December, wasn't it? The book,
yes, mate, yeah.
Strength of Mind, it's called, yeah.
Mate,
super excited to have you on. We were just saying before we started recording, ideally would have wanted to get you in the studio, but no doubt we'll get you in for a part 2 when all this craziness is over. But mate, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it.
No, honestly, mate, I've been, like I said, following you with interest. So yeah, I'm sort of really chuffed to be on here. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
thanks for giving me time.
Reading your bio and stuff. When I told Tom you were coming on, it's difficult to kind of pick a point to even start. It's amazing, mate, what you've achieved. It is really incredible. I don't know, Tom, where do you and what intrigued you? I think it's
I mean, I think we always like to take things. I don't like the phrase "take things back to the start" as such, and like go through the journey. I think because that gives people a lot of context. And when Andy sent over the bio that you've got, I mean, alluding to what Andy's just repeating there, but it is incredible, mate. So I know you started off in the Grenadier Guards, didn't you?
Yeah.
What was, I mean, I always ask the same question. Obviously, I'm not from a military background. So what was the sort of precursor to joining the Grenadier Guards? Was there a reason behind that initially? Like I always think a lot of people that we've had on the podcast just a lot of the time joined some sort of military because they were maybe lost. They didn't know what they wanted to do. And that was sort of a bit of a formal path, if you like.
To be honest, mate, like I didn't have the best of times at school. So I mean, I think that's where a lot of my sort of mentality is sort of stemmed from. But for me, joining the forces was an escape. It would get me sort of away from Milton Keynes, I suppose, at the time, and I could be myself. I could, join the army where you go with a load of strangers that you've not met before, and you can be yourself. You've got a fresh slate. So yeah, sort of the
How old was
experience I
you
had
when
in
you joined?
secondary school took its toll. Sorry,
How old was you when you joined?
18, mate. I wanted to join at 16, but obviously you need parental sort of consent at that point, don't you? And my mother at the time really wasn't keen on me joining. So as soon as I turned 18, I joined anyway. So
That just reminded me. Yeah, I joined at 17, and I remember now actually my dad having to give me the permission. I forgot you had to do that.
yeah. I wanted to join at 16, but yeah, I suppose I showed that I was still keen on it. But yeah, I mean, I love the idea of the sort of having an active job. I don't think throughout school I ever sort of really took to sitting at a desk and being behind a computer like we are now. But I couldn't do this 12 hours a day, 5 days a week. So anything I was going to do, I was always going to sort of be active. And like I said, the army was sort of almost an escape for me.
What year did you join, Mark?
2003.
So when the Iraq War kicked off, then.
Yeah.
So did you go straight out through your training and then straight to? Were you then straight out in Iraq? Is that how it worked for you?
No, my first tour was Bosnia. So yeah, I passed out of training early 2004, and then through the Grenadiers, you'll go to a ceremonial company before battalion, and yeah, you'll carry out sort of public duties. So Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, and so forth, trooping the colour. And then from
What was
there,
that
that's
like?
a
I've never
stepping
spoken to
stone.
anyone who's done all that kind of stuff. What was that like?
The novelty wears off pretty quick. The first few times, it's no, it in hindsight now, it's it's something to sort of be really proud of. I mean, my last troop in the colour, we were the escort to the colour, so that's your troop. So yeah, to look back on it now, I'm really proud that I got to sort of be a part of that. But yeah, to be fair, at the time when you're bouncing back to back Queen's Guards every 24 hours for sort of 2-3 weeks solid, it wears pretty thin. Especially when sort of the summer months and your boots have melted after sort of being stood in the sun for hours on end. And yeah, that's the side of it obviously people don't see, is you got to get back to sort of being that immaculate sort of standard. But yeah, from there I then went and joined the battalion after my sort of 6 months of ceremonial, and flew straight out to Bosnia.
With that, mate, I know you had 6 months of the ceremonial duties, but was there a bit of you that bit of naivety? Because I remember, only from my personal experience, I remember being in training and we'd fucked up in training, we'd been beasted, and the troop boss came in and was like, you fuckers don't realise that as soon as you pass out, the week later you're going to be in Brize Norton flying off to Iraq or Afghanistan. Do you fucking realise that? And I remember being 17, 18 thinking, nah, surely not. But then literally that was what was happening. Was there a bit of you that thought, in 6 months' time I'm going to be, on operations?
I actually, looking at it now, I think it's good to have that other stepping stone. I think had I gone straight from passing out at Catterick straight on an operational tour, there's a big difference. So I think doing the ceremonial duties gave you that taste of sort of battalion life. Everything was a little bit more grown up. So I actually think that sort of 6 month stint probably sets you up well for then going on operational tours, because you've been around older men, I suppose, with experience. At that point, The battalion hadn't long got back from sort of Northern Ireland, so you're around experienced people, whereas I suppose the jump from basic training to a tour is probably a bigger lump.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Especially if quite a number of you pass out together, you're all young together. You need to be blooded in with the older, more experienced guys, don't you?
Yeah. We were all sort of 18, 19 when we passed out. So, yeah, to sort of them be in multiples with lads in their 30s that have, like I said, done sort of numerous Northern Ireland tours and stuff, you learnt more from them than obviously sort of the lads you were in training with.
Someone won't get this as well, but having someone who'd been to Bosnia as well and done that tour, it was always, you kind of look on envious on the medals parade that someone's got the medals from Bosnia. I mean, what was that tour like?
Now, just before you answer that question, my memory of Bosnia is non-existent, because I thought the Bosnian War started in like 92 and then lasted like 3 or 4 years. So I presume, was it a peacekeeping? It wasn't. Well, yeah, I'm sure you're about to answer it, but my mind of Bosnia War was back in the early 90s. I didn't realise that back in 2004 it was still ongoing.
Yeah. It's obviously it was more of a laid back tour compared to sort of obviously later tours. But as someone obviously going on their first operational tour, it was a good bit of experience. We got to work with sort of the Dutch, the Italians, sort of other sort of British units, and our role sort of was quite varied. So I had a real sort of mixture of a tour, from vehicle checkpoints to sort of stopping and setting up searches at nightclubs and stuff like that. So
that's
yeah,
mental.
that's something I love, mate. But yeah, doing house searches for munitions, obviously from the war, the drug trafficking, human trafficking that was going on, obviously through Eastern Europe. So that side of it, yeah, it was a big eye opener. But yeah, I mean, in terms of obviously sort of using your weapon for its purpose that you would in Iraq and Afghanistan, then no, that sort of, it wasn't that sort of tour.
Does it have that? I presume Bosnia. I always think of Bosnia as got very like a USSR sort of feel about it. You know, like very communist, sort of like old grey buildings and that. You know, that like grimy sort of feel to it.
Yeah. The parts that we worked in, it's similar to sort of a lot of Eastern European countries. But to be fair, it was nice. It was. I mean, at that time, like I was just sort of happy to be away and earning a medal. So, it could have.
Funny you say that, mate. There's so funny you say that. There's a Winston Churchill quote, and he says, men will fight long into the night for a piece of ribbon. And the first thing you said, it's like, I just wanted the Bosnia medal.
Yeah.
It's weird, isn't it? You get these bunch of guys, and it's like, if there's a chance to go to like wherever, I'll go get a medal. I've not got one of them. No one I know's got one. I'll go.
And I think that's the thing. Obviously, with the Guards, when you are back in England, you are still doing the ceremonial duties, even in battalion. So to come back and you're stood with lads that have done Northern Ireland and the First Gulf and Kosovo, and so you didn't want to be that bloke on parade with no medals. So obviously jumping at the chance to do Bosnia. I wouldn't stand out so much when it came back to doing ceremonial.
I just think it's crazy that, like, in 2004, obviously all the news around Iraq and what was going on there, and that to think that you were in Bosnia, it's great. It's things that you just don't hear about, that you were there doing, like you just said before, checkpoints at nightclubs. The mainstream news, like, I had literally no idea. I didn't even know British soldiers were there in 2000. Like, no idea. Like, it's just crazy, to think that there's, it's just madness.
I mean, there was still several years of tours to sort of Bosnia and Kosovo after us. Like probably carrying out sort of very similar sort of operations and patrols and stuff. So
it sounds like another good stepping stone, like you say, as well, doesn't it? For Iraq and Afghanistan, where it was a lot more kind of, like you say, using your weapon for its purposes. It sounds like I had a similar tour in Iraq where it was just similar to what you're saying then. And I just looking back now, it was an ideal tour for me to go to Iraq for 6 months because you were not. It wasn't like the fighting, but it matured you and it made you realise what it was like to be on operations with the guys and stuff. It was a nice bedding in kind of tour.
Yeah. I mean, for us, sort of in the Grenadiers, it's probably different now, but to go from Nijmegen Company, which was the ceremonial company after training, to battalion, there was this big sort of reputation of going to battalion, big, horrible, hard bastards. So you had this fear. You go to battalion, you keep your head down, you stay quiet. And then obviously you add to the mix going straight on an operational tour with them. Yeah, I think all little experiences like that, when I look back now, and the sort of multiple commanders and stuff I got to work under during that 6 months, you're just learning all the time. So yeah, I'm probably grateful that was my first tour, really, rather than the lads that obviously passed out and then went straight to Afghanistan sort of 2-3 days later.
Yeah.
Is that what you did after Bosnia, Mark? Did you come back to the UK and then did you then go out to Iraq or Afghanistan?
Yeah, the following year we went out to Iraq. We actually got told, the whole battalion got called into the gym on my 21st birthday. We were due to be going on exercise in Canada. And there'd been murmurs that we were getting fastballed for Telic. And then, yeah, my 21st birthday got called in. Right, lads, you're not going to Canada. We're going to Iraq in 4 months' time. So, yeah, so I sort of phoned my sort of now wife at the time and was like, yeah, I've got some news. And obviously trying to cram in 18 months worth of pre-deployment training into 4 months. I wasn't home for a large chunk of that 4 months.
That's some 21st birthday present, that, mate.
Yeah. I mean, me personally, at that age, I was well happy with that. But yeah, I mean, she was obviously, Iraq was quite sort of kinetic at the time. So yeah, she didn't share my enthusiasm when I phoned her.
You do forget some, like for me again, never, not part of the military at all. It's the strain that even just like a phone call like that then has on you just relationships and knowing that you've got to go away. It's always with my line of work at the moment, I might go away for 1-2 weeks, at the most, and even that can be tricky having that conversation. So let alone saying, listen, in 4 months I'm going to be away for.
I remember you ringing me the other week saying you might have to go to America for 5 days. You were nearly having a panic attack telling your wife.
Yeah, it was more of a case of I've had a 6-week-old baby, thinking, fucking hell, I'm gonna pull this one off because I really want to go to the US. That's what I mean, like, and especially how people do it with, and how people still do it, and how people did do it with if they've got young kids, or it's hard enough for me trying to get 2 weeks away, let alone saying I'm going to war and I'm going to be away for 6 months.
I think as well, what the other thing, what strikes me now, even though I live this kind of life, and you talk about it, Mark, it always sounds different, is just how young you are. You're 21. You've already got one tour underneath your belt, and you're now going on another tour. And again, you're still only 21. It's isn't it, when you look back?
That's the thing, obviously, like I said about school, to then compare where my life was at that time as a 21-year-old, sort of, getting ready to go out to Iraq, which was the area that we would then go to, was one of the sort of, the busiest parts of Iraq at the time. To compare with where my life had taken me sort of after school compared to lads I'd gone to school with. We'd had very different experiences. And yeah, you look at a 21-year-old at our age now, and you think, there's no way that person would be ready to sort of step out the back of a Chinook.
What was that tour of Iraq like?
I loved it, mate. I loved being out there. We split down, so half the rifle company went up to Baghdad, and I was fortunate to be one of the platoons that went up to Baghdad. So we did a few months up there, at the Baghdad support unit. So a lot of everything was pretty much a vehicle patrol. But at the time, all of our patrols were centered around Route Irish, which at the time was the most heavily IED'd road in the world. So obviously that carried with it a sort of element of nerves every time you went out. But it was surreal because you're on top cover of a snatch wagon, so which they were not cut out for that role. A sort of a Land Rover, basically.
I think there's some Range Rovers on the streets in the UK that are better equipped to take on a bomb than those vehicles out in Iraq.
Oh yeah, they were horrendous. But in those sort of surreal moments, to sort of look around Baghdad as a city and not as a war-torn place, like it was beautiful.
I do that all the time.
Yeah, like the architecture, the palm trees. It was quite a very, like where you said about the sort of mainstream news and stuff, Tom. Like it wasn't how you'd picture Iraq. I loved the time up in Baghdad. And then for the second half of the tour, we came back down to Shaiba in Basra, and we took over the prison, which that's when it sort of nosedived, really. It was just Sanger bashing for the last few months. And
just what you're saying about the Route Irish, mate, one thing that what I always remember from Iraq, it's funny looking back now, but at the time, fuck me, was I scared. My very first patrol, and I had a really cushy tour in Iraq. We very rarely left the base. We had, a volleyball court, we had a swimming pool. It was really, really chilled out, I'll be honest. And anyway, this one time we got to go on a patrol up to an American base, like 20 minutes, half an hour up the road. So you were kind of chomping at the bit just to get out the base.
Yeah.
So I volunteered and I went top cover. And we had the brief beforehand. And in the brief, it was like, right, guys, the IEDs that they lay, what they will normally do is put like a pile of rocks where there's going to be a bomb. And then the idea is they'll go and sit on a building far away. And then as the building goes in line with those rocks, they know that's when to press the button. The bomb goes off. So, Andy, your top cover, if you see any rocks, just notify the driver. Now, I'm like, 18. I'm like, right, okay, just looking for rocks everywhere. 2 minutes into driving, there are fucking piles of rocks fucking everywhere. And I remember the guy, Mac, driving, the Scottish lad. I said, Mac, mate, fucking stop. There's things on the left. And he just carried on driving. He'd been there like 6 months. I'd only been there about 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Like, Andy, mate, shut the fuck up. Don't tell me it's going to be 2 minutes. And go, mate, there's fucking rocks everywhere. And it was just, it's funny looking back now, but at the time, I was just going like,
Yeah.
Mad, isn't it?
Yeah. To be fair, like going up and down that route, you would see American wagons all the time that had been sort of blown up and stuff, but we just seemed to get lucky that tour. The luckiest part of it, you said about swimming pools and stuff. We used to stop off. One of the American bases was one of Saddam's old palaces, and that had a swimming pool. And we'd leave a couple of the new lads out with the snatch wagons, take your weapon in, sort of strip off to your shorts, and you'd be in a swimming pool with like women in bikinis and M16s and stuff, and they had like popcorn machines, and it's like, you're like on a lad's holiday, and then you look up and the Mert are sort of flying over, and like this is
insane.
Not what I imagined. So.
Mate, I'm just curious. When we're doing the podcast, sometimes in person, I just like pull things up on the computer, and I just tried to see if there was any like any like information about that Route Irish in terms of how many attacks and things like that. And but there was a film made about it called Route Irish, and it was a 7.5 mile stretch of highway linking the Green Zone to Baghdad Airport. I tried to find see if there was any. It said it was obviously, like you just said, it was the world's most dangerous road. And there's just pictures here of, I think there's pictures online of drive-by shootings, a big thing at suicide bombers at checkpoints, and then just random shootings. Like, it looks fucking insane.
It's like Andy said though, like you know, when you very first go down Route Irish, your eyes are everywhere. You know, the windows of the high-rise buildings and stuff. And after a few months there, you're just like, we'll just take our chances, because you just, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. You couldn't, you'd be exhausted trying to sort of scan everything.
You'd have a nervous breakdown, wouldn't you? If you thought like that every day, within a week you'd be mentally drained, and that's when I try and explain to people, you just kind of get on with it, don't you? It's just you just have to.
Yeah, you've got all your insurances in place if something happens. But
one thing that I, especially after these few days that we've had, we had Paul Stredder on, who was in the Royal Marines. We had Joe McCleary, who the UK government chased after him through IHAT, with accusations of murder and war crimes and things like that. And pretty much the resounding thing from someone who's obviously never been in the military is how fucking poorly the equipment you guys had out there. Like, you mentioned the Land Rover before, how shit that was. The weapons, I remember articles about is it SA-80 or something like that, how they kept jamming. Yeah. Joe, on Saturday when we had Joe on the podcast, he had one pair of camouflage stuff for the whole tour for 6 months. I mean, it's just like, I never realised the extent until you guys and Andy and all the other people we've had on, how poorly. Like, I mean, you're fighting a fucking war. You're not going, to the supermarket, are you?
Yeah. I mean, like Andy said, like, there's probably vehicles on the roads in the UK that would withstand an IED better than the vehicles that we had. But like he said, you almost have to forget about that, because it would drive you mad. You wouldn't drive out the gate if you really sort of put into perspective how at risk you were.
What about other like forces, other nations? Like, did you look up and think, fucking hell, the Americans have got the best gear, or was it not like that at all?
We more thought that the Americans had a cushy camp. We used to stop off. So the BIAP, the Baghdad International Airport, was at the end of Route Irish. And if the platoon commander came out on a patrol with us, he would let us stop off and use their PX, so their sort of cookhouses and stuff. And so we used to sort of go in. They'd always have scoff on, so you'd fill all your map pockets with like Gatorades and Pop-Tarts and stuff. And yeah, that was the stuff we were envious of. Not their Humvees, just the fact that they had Pop-Tarts and Gatorade. Yeah, we used to go back to the snatches, literally like, 30 odd pounds worth of stolen stuff.
Mate, what was the so one tour of Bosnia down, one tour of Iraq?
Yeah.
What was what led after that?
So after that, whilst I was in Iraq, I proposed to sort of my girlfriend at the time. So
whilst in Iraq?
Yeah, I was actually England were playing Ecuador in the second round of the 2006 World Cup. And we'd been out on patrol that morning. And we was talking about sort of what we're going to do when we get back home. And I said I was going to propose at the end of the tour. And we knew that the BBC, when there's like a World Cup and stuff on, they tend to go to sort of British bases and stuff, don't they? Or they did at the time. And we was talking about it, and I was like, they said, "Oh, I bet you ain't got the minerals to do it on the news." So I'll bet you I have. Like, and then the platoon commander got wind of this, and at the time I was a guardsman. He's like, "What's all this, Guardsman Smith?" And they were like, "Oh, he's going to ask his missus to marry him on the news." And that was it then. Like, the decision was made for me. So yeah, I managed to get off of being on the Sanger, and we had like a little TV room in camp. But the company sergeant major and the platoon sergeant made me sit in between them on this bench so that they got some FaceTime on the news. And this reporter was like, "Oh, you've got something you want to ask, haven't you?" And so yeah, I asked my sort of now wife on the news from Baghdad to marry me, and they linked us up. And I couldn't tell you what the day was. what the date was, but I could tell you that David Beckham scored and we beat Ecuador 1-0. So after that, because the battalion were going on Herrick 6 the following year, I wouldn't be back in time for the wedding. So there was a posting to go back to the ceremonial company, which would allow me to obviously get fitted for a tunic, have the time off that I'd need for the wedding and stuff. So I went back on a posting, and I did about a year there, but I nearly ended up missing my wedding anyway, because Nijmegen company had an overseas exercise in Jamaica. So we did the jungle exercise. I loved it, to be honest. It was carnage. We didn't fly from Bryce, we flew from Heathrow, and we got there sort of early doors. All of our kit got checked in, and the company site agency got 2 hours before we're boarding. So
it's dangerous.
The whole company disappeared off to O'Neill's Irish bar in Heathrow, where it got shit-faced. So the exercise got off to a great start, and that theme carried on throughout the 6 weeks, really. And we were due to fly back, and the biggest hurricane to hit the Caribbean at that point on record hit. Hurricane Dean it was. So our camp at the time in Port Antonio was literally going to be in sort of the eye of the storm. So we got moved to a hotel in Kingston. Again, just...
You were all gutted about that.
Oh, mate. There was more gunfire in Kingston than there was in Afghan. But yeah, we obviously just spent the few days at the bar in the hotel. And the day that it hit, we ended up sort of doing man tests and stuff, like who could stand out in the hurricane the longest, without sort of flapping. And there's bits of like Wrigley tin roof going everywhere and foam pylons. And so yeah, when I phoned my wife to sort of say I was all right, she's like, "Oh, was it?" It's like, yeah, we were doing man tests, like. So, but yeah, when we then went out to do some relief work in the following few days, the sort of reality sunk in of sort of the devastation that it had caused. So, yeah, our flights back were delayed so that we could sort of help out with some of the relief work.
That's the great thing about the army, isn't it, mate? You said before about, what you were doing at 21 compared to guys back home at 21. You find yourself as a young man, helping out with disaster relief in Jamaica. I mean, that in itself is a story, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. I was so glad I got the opportunity to sort of go back to that company and be on that exercise. Obviously learning the sort of survival school and stuff that we did in the jungle and things like that is, again, all sort of different sort of strings to add to your bow that would help later on in my career. But I mean, as soon as we were married, I asked to go back to battalion. I was sort of, as much as I went back for the right reasons to obviously ensure that I was home for our wedding, there was such a sort of air of guilt, the fact that I'd missed Herrick 6, because the lads had a really tough tour. We'd lost 5 blokes. It was the first time where the regiment had sort of amputees and stuff come back, and so as much as it was nice to have a bit of fun in Jamaica and sort of be back in London doing ceremonial, I just felt this like overwhelming guilt that I'd missed that tour. So when I went back to battalion, sort of almost went back with my tail between my legs a little bit, like a bit sheepish, because these lads, when you talk about sort of being a bit more grown up from your experiences, that tour had really taken its toll on a lot of my sort of mates in the company.
You can see, mate, as well, you will have noticed it more than we're having that time away. I remember when I went to Afghan, we were all 18, 19, 20, 21. One lad in particular, Gibbo, his name was, he had such a baby face. And you look at him at the end of the tour, he looks in his 30s. By
Yeah,
the end of the tour, he's
Really?
baby face, and at the end of it, you just thought, "Fuck me, man, you've aged
yeah,
15 years in 6 months." And I imagine you saw that more than anyone back
yeah,
up with you guys.
yeah. Definitely, you're almost in a bit of a bubble, sort of doing the ceremonial and, like I said, doing jungle exercises, and in my eyes, that was all a bit of fun. And all of my sort of free time was taken up with sort of, preparing the wedding sort of thing. And then to go back and see the 6 months that they'd obviously had, to see friends of mine that had, lost their sight, lost legs, and I sort of just felt at that point I couldn't wait for Herrick to come round again, because I felt like I had to do that tour to experience some of what they'd obviously experienced that last 6 months.
Hmm.
So yeah, I went back and just almost like a new lad again, just kept my head down, and I thought, I'll just work hard, do all the right things. And thankfully, um, we had an overseas exercise again in the Falkland Islands. So that then was an opportunity for me to sort of use a bit of the experiences I'd gained from that exercise and the two tours. And um, that was really good for sort of settling back into the company. And it was after that I'd been offered my corporal's course for promotion, and yeah, sort of I'd been offered it in the past, but never quite felt like I had enough experience or wasn't old enough necessarily. And there were still lads in the company that had those experiences, like Afghan and stuff. And whereas when it came around that time, I felt like I'd sort of worked my way up the pecking order, and I could have a bit more responsibility and sort of leadership, and had a bit more experience behind me. And so yeah, that's when I probably took the career more seriously. Obviously, like London, you knock off at sort of 1:30, 2:00 every day, and you're in Leicester Square by 3:00. So I had a bit of a jolly for the first few years, really. So after then, I started to sort of actually see it as a career, and the progression that I could make.
What year now are we talking about that you're going into now? You're a corporal now, and
Yeah, 2008, and the following year we had Kenya, and then Herrick 11.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so
So I will have just been injured. Then I got injured on Herrick 9. So that was 2008, 2009. Yeah.
yeah.
So
Oh,
yeah,
I'm. What does Herrick? What does it actually stand like? What does it mean?
yeah. I'll let you explain, Mark.
Oh, okay. So the MOD's basically got a book of names,
Ah,
and they'll when there's an operational tour, they'll sort of basically pick a name out of it. So Telic, Althea, Oculus, and Herrick. So it's just the name of each operational tour.
yeah. I've heard the name bashed around, but I thought it was like segmented into like Royal Marines, and it was just they just given them a name for that like tour. I didn't realize it was like
And
everyone's grouped together.
the number will be obviously for that 6 month period, or
Right.
so.
I'm with
Yeah,
you.
I was Herrick 9, and then if you were Herrick 11, it would have been 18 months or so afterwards.
Yeah.
Right.
Whereabouts in Afghan were you?
Nadi Ali.
Yeah.
Uh, um,
Was it a
yeah.
static tour, or you in and about, or you in a fob?
We were in a checkpoint. Out of all the multiples in the company, we were probably the multiple that got to sort of do and see the most. We got shafted a little bit, to be honest. Like every time it was on a rotation for the multiple to have a month of vehicle patrols out of Lashkar, we'd get crashed out and be back out on the ground for another month. So my multiple sort of spent 6 months in and out of checkpoints and fobs, and but that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to have that sort of tour. I mean, speaking to sort of other people that have asked about Afghanistan, I was no good at the hearts and minds stuff. I didn't want to go out and hand out radios and kites, and my mindset at the time was I wanted to go out and sort of, based off missing the last Afghan tour, I wanted to go out and prove myself as a soldier. So I almost sort of thrived off the fact of being in the contacts and the firefights, and that was what I wanted to experience in that tour.
It's a
And
weird feeling, isn't it, of wanting to put yourself in an uncomfortable position just to see how you will react. I remember thinking myself, I want to be in a firefight, so I know what I'll do. It's like I wanted myself to prove to myself that I was capable of,
yeah,
being
yeah.
surrounding.
That's the thing. I think the way I've sort of said it before is, as a soldier, and especially at that time as a lance corporal, to be able to look in the mirror and know that, when the sort of shit hit the fan, that you were still able to do your job to the best of your ability. Because no one knows how we had lads that when it came to it, they, we had a couple that sort of crumbled, and it really wasn't for them. So to be able to sort of look at myself at the end of that tour and know that I was still able to sort of, be a good NCO and sort of a leader. I felt quite proud of myself after that tour. I suppose that I did feel like I led by example there when it mattered, and that's why I'm sort of glad this didn't happen on a tour like that, because I was enjoying that responsibility and that leadership.
And what year were you in Afghan then? What year was that?
So it was a winter tour, so it was 09-10.
Because 09 as well, and 2010, they were a couple of the deadliest years for British Armed Forces. In my motivational speaking I do all the time, I get a slide up, and I think it was in 2009, there was 108 British soldiers killed in 1 year.
Yeah.
And you think for everyone that's killed, there are 7 or 8 that are seriously injured. You think that's nearly 900 soldiers seriously injured just in 1 year alone. It's fucking bonkers, isn't it? Like, to think that, you were there at that time, me and you were there then, and you don't realise how fucked up it was, I don't think, until you look back and you think that's not normal, that.
Yeah. I mean, we lost another 5 lads in the regiment on that tour, and again, loads and loads of injuries. But I think, I mean, our rifle company ourselves, 6 weeks before we was due to fly back, we lost one of our section commanders, and a couple of lads were injured that day as well through an IED. But it was more towards the beginning of the tour. You probably saw about it. Our regimental sergeant major and several others got killed in Shawkat by a rogue Afghan policeman.
I remember that, yeah.
Fucking hell, I do remember that on the news, yeah.
Yeah. We were out about 200 meters away from where that happened. I was on top cover at the time, and all of these 9-liners start coming through over the net. So I'm obviously sort of relaying that back, and then you start realizing who that is. And then obviously that particular patrol ended up turning into stop all Afghan police that come through this way. But yeah, that's the tour that sort of really left a mark on people, because, like I said, our sergeant major was seen as indestructible, big, horrible, loud bloke from Essex, put the fear of God into you. So the fact that he'd lost his life made you all feel a bit more vulnerable.
It's funny you say that. We had on the tour, there was a guy called Baz Barry, who was a mountain leader, really legendary guy in the Corps, unbelievable footballer, unbelievable leader, just an unbelievable soldier. And again, that same kind of, person that you described, then you look over and you think, wow, nothing's happening to him.
Yeah.
And he was caught up in an IED strike, and he lost a leg and badly injured his arm. And it's a similar thing, you looked at it then and you thought, fucking hell, like, this is, shit's just got real now, because I didn't think anything could happen to him, and now he's lost a leg. And it's weird, isn't it, how just one person can get injured and it can have an effect on so many people.
Yeah, it definitely made you feel like, so you saw people like sort of Daz Chant as indestructible, and the fact that someone had taken his life just like that. It's sort of that left a big impression on the battalion. And then when we got back, we found out that his wife was sort of pregnant at the time and stuff. And so it's not just seeing him as a sergeant. We'd all seen him as the sergeant major. I've been stood in front of him several times, and not always for good reasons. But then you come back and you see the family side of the man and everything that's sort of left behind, and they're all the things that they leave more of an impression on you, I think, than the contacts and the patrols and all that stuff.
100%, mate. I feel more impacted on going to the lads' funerals and seeing the mums, the dads, the brothers, the sisters, girlfriends. I'm more impacted to this day from seeing them than anything I saw in Afghan.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard, that, isn't it? Jesus. Mark, what was? I mean, I don't know if it's surprising or not, but you've done all that crazy stuff and everything that, Route Irish and, all the tours. And then it was a training exercise in 2011, wasn't it, in Canada?
Yeah.
That went a little bit Pete Tong.
Yeah. I've had better days. So after Afghan, I'd obviously sort of, like I said, I felt like I'd had a good tour, in terms of leadership, and I was offered my next promotion. So I went off for 4 months to Brecon to do the section commanders battle course, and past that, I went back to battalion to be promoted, and I was told, you're going out to Canada in a couple of days.
Your missus loves you at this point.
Well, bearing in mind she gave birth a week into juniors as well, to our first boy. So at the time, my DS, my instructor had said, has anyone got any compassionate things and so forth that they might sort of need to get away for on a course? And I was like, my wife's 9 months pregnant. And it was a 3.5-hour drive back from Brecon to Milton Keynes. And we'd done sleep deprivation the week that she actually gave birth. And I remember just driving back, sort of rotating eyelids and stuff, and thinking, I can't wait to get back and go to sleep. And I've come down the road sort of about 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and my mother-in-law's car's outside on a Friday night. I was like, I just want to go to bed. And as I've gone in, my wife's having contractions and all red-faced. And I was half excited and half gutted, because I daydreamed all the drive back about going to sleep. But to be fair, I hardly saw her or my son, because I was in Brecon Monday to Friday, coming back doing patrol reports and everything like that at weekends and coursework. And so then when Brecon finished, my company sergeant major sort of pulled me into his office and said, you're off to Canada in 2 weeks' time. And not only will you be doing the exercise with the company, you'll also be staying on as safety staff afterwards. So you'll be out there for 3 months. Oh, and then when you get back, then you're going off to do your jungle warfare instructor course in Belize. So, like you said, my wife loved me at that point. I always phoned with good news. So I got a couple of days leave. I said to him, I didn't have any time off on the course after my son was born. So he gave me a couple of days. And again, the actual exercise went really well. I absolutely loved being a section commander, being able to, I'd cherry pick things from different people I'd worked under for years, and finally I could mould a section in the way that I felt things should be. And I loved that role. And I got to step up a few times to platoon sergeant and stuff, and I enjoyed that as well. So I really felt like my career was sort of on the up. And then after our exercise, we'd gone out for some beers in Medicine Hat, and I'd ended up, our company and the safety staff ended up scrapping. So then when I turned up the next day to join the safety staff, they recognised us. So I spent the first few days sort of sandbag filling and grovelling. And then, I had a bit of a different role. So the opportunity came up to work with the armoured infantry, which was all new to me. But it was like, well, it means I'm not going on foot for the next 6 weeks. Like I'll do it. So I got attached to working with 3 Yorks. So they were dismounting out the back of wagons and taking positions that way. So it meant that we could stay on the back of vehicles and just follow them. So that side of it was a bit of a break compared to the other safety staff lads. Worked their way up through the live firing, sort of going down as an individual, pairs, fire team, section, all that. And then this particular day, I'd always had a bit of a sixth sense. I had it in Afghan as well, on a couple of sort of times when we got ambushed and things like that, where I just had a horrible feeling before certain patrols. And this particular morning of the platoon attacks, I texted my wife just sort of saying, it's got a bit of a horrible feeling about today. And obviously with the time difference, she was still asleep. And we'd gone through the first platoon attack, so they'd debussed, taken a bunker position, progressed on to clearing a trench system, and then onto compounds. So the first platoon attack, the section I was following went fire support after the trench, so that was as far as I went. But there were a lot of sort of shortfallings. Where I was temporary staff, I didn't have the relevant kit, I didn't have a radio, didn't have deserts, which all the other safety staff were in, didn't have a call sign, didn't have high vis. Just where you were saying about how poor the kit was in Iraq with snatch vehicles and stuff, I was the snatch equivalent of a safety bod, and that's why
It's crazy to think that as well on a live firing range, that those kind of shortcuts are going to be taken.
Yeah, it was so when you think of the scale of a platoon attack range and how everything gets spread out and how quickly you can get disorientated if you haven't got an understanding of where people are going to and so on. And I raised my concerns at the end of the first platoon attack to the RCO at the time, who was a rifles officer. But that was my first sort of external work, really. So I was basically sort of told to wind my neck in and get on with it. And then, yeah, lo and behold, the next platoon went down, and I followed the lead section this time to go and clear the first compound. And the sort of 3 assaulting pairs had stacked up outside the building, myself being the last man, so the furthest forward on the range at this time. And as the first pair have gone in, he's fired at the target, and I'm the other side of the wall, and they've come through the back of me. Friends of mine that were safety staff with me at the time, in a roundabout way, think that the target itself may have been pasted onto the wrong wall, hence why where I wasn't safe. But yeah, as it was, I ended up taking sort of several shots through my backside, which came out via my groin, hitting the femoral artery on the way, and then one through my shoulder. But whereas safety, we were also looking at their tactics and their procedures. We were giving them role play casualties, to test their sort of casualty evacuation. And so there was an air of confusion when this happened to me, because man down gets called and they think it's just another exercise casualty, until one of the other safety staff comes back out the building after the second room is clear and finds me with an arterial bleed laying on the floor, sort of screaming. So then stop gets called on the range. I mean, what followed was just a comedy of errors. I've since been told that to be hit where I was hit, had it happened in Afghanistan, chances are I'd still have my leg. You've got your platinum 10, your golden hour, haven't you, in terms of getting you to Bastion.
How does that make you feel, just on that? Sorry, Mark, to interrupt. How does that make you feel knowing that?
At the time, the army was all I wanted to do. So the fact that something like that potentially cost me my career, really, really sort of upset me. But looking back at it now, I actually think sort of losing my leg was the best thing to happen to me. But at the time, all I ever wanted to do was sort of be a soldier. So I never really had a backup plan. So yeah, to know that so many shortfallings cost me my leg and almost my life. Yeah, that was hard to sort of take at the time.
What were those like what were the sort of comedy of errors that kept happening, Mark?
So where the Grenadiers, where we'd done our 6-week exercise before that, we'd all done obviously numerous tours by that point. So we all carried 2 tourniquets, morphine, first field dressing. Whereas 3 Yorks hadn't been on a tour of Afghanistan by that point. So no one carried anything like that. So there was no medical equipment there apart from what the safety staff had between themselves. When the 9-liner was called through to get a heli in to come and sort of aeromed me, they thought it was, again, exercise role play. So it took 90 minutes to get me off the ground.
Wow.
There were no Chinooks, no Black Hawks, no anything like that. So a Lynx helicopter turned up, which they struggled to fit the stretcher on. I had no morphine, so I had no sort of pain relief the whole time.
No.
So, yeah,
Jesus.
I got the full sort of the full experience. So.
Mate, you're making mine sound like a twisted sock. Fucking.
Oh mate, I tell you, it's the most painful part. It wasn't even being shot. It was one of the lads went to apply the tourniquet above the exit wound, and he'd caught my ball sack as it
Oh,
twisted.
fucking hell.
So I'm screaming in agony, and that was more painful than being shot. That was.
How many rounds did you actually catch up?
I took 6 to my leg and then 1 to my shoulder. So yeah, it caused me to, flatline on the heli. I think I relaxed too much. I sort of felt at that point, maybe similar to yourself, once you're on that heli, you're safe. And that was probably the worst thing I could have done, because at that point I sort of flatlined, and it took about 5 minutes to bring me back. The long-term effects of that, I've ended up with a hypoxic injury, which is a lack of oxygen to the brain. So my short-term memory is horrendous. But yeah, I needed the old defibrillators and stuff at that point. And
Fucking hell.
My wife was actually, where it was Canada, the Grenadier welfare team knocked on the door at sort of 6:30 in the morning with a time difference, and had her flown out to Canada. And it was essentially to turn off my life support. So at that point, yeah, I wasn't in a good way. But I mean, had it not been for the safety staff lads that I was working with, I wouldn't be, like, with their sort of experience and stuff. They played a huge part in sort of keeping me alive.
Ironically, was this the guys who you were fighting with before it started?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, they were phenomenal.
So and Mark, you were put on a life support machine because obviously you'd flatlined for 5 minutes, and that they presumed that, I presume you're in induced coma, and they presumed that, listen, he ain't gonna, if anything, his mind is not gonna even be able to compute anymore because of what's happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, from what my wife had said, obviously the 2 days after being shot, I was oblivious. I didn't even know I'd been sedated and moved from Medicine Hat to Calgary. When I woke up, the first thing I noticed was my wife had her hair done. I didn't know I was in Calgary. I still had the leg, but there were about 8 drains coming off the leg, and they were all filling with sort of black fluid. And within a couple of minutes, this surgeon stepped in, and he'd said, look, if we don't sort of take your leg today, you're not going to see the day out. So the leg was starting to give me organ failure. And at first I refused because I obviously seeing ones like Andy and how well he walks and runs as a below knee amputee, I wouldn't let them amputate unless I was below knee. So my wife gave me a bit of a stern talking to, and then I signed the consent form to let them take my leg.
It's funny that it is such a big, I know it's not a big decision when it comes to, living or dying, but it's a big thing, the above and below knee, isn't it? When I talk to people, sometimes I get people message me and ask them, and they'll ask me for advice. Maybe they've had a car accident or something, and it's above or below knee amputation. And I try and say to people, there is a big difference of, your knees. It's a good old bit of kit, your kneecap. It does its job, and I think, like you say, you can walk. For me, I've lost my ankle joint. That is it. It's so easy for me to walk. Like you say, as soon as you take it above the knee, it's a whole new kettle of fish.
Yeah, because I still, for that split second, I still thought if I was a below knee, I could stay in. Whereas two friends of mine on Herrick 6 had lost their legs above the knee and just really seemed to struggle. They'd chose to stay in, working in sort of the armory and stuff like that. And they just seemed to always be in pain. And that was part of my thought process. Those two lads straight away I've seen how much they struggle. But I mean, to be fair, once they took it above the knee, I went back down several more times to take a bit more because I still had sort of infection and stuff. But once they'd taken the leg, I started to sort of pick up, and I obviously was off the life support by that point. But yeah, once they'd amputated the leg, they then weren't sure if I'd lose the arm. I hadn't moved the arm for the first few days, where the sort of shot had gone in and out through my shoulder. It missed the nerves that control the use of your arm by about 1 millimeter. So, I mean, to be fair, that would have sort of cut me up a lot more. I think, like I said, I'd known lads who were on prosthetics, so I knew I'd walk again, but I really didn't want to lose the arm, and also I'd just had a sleeve finished, so I was like, "You're not taking the arm, like that's cost me hundreds." So.
It's so funny, isn't it, mate? The debate you have with injured lads, and it's the kind of what would you rather? Whether I think I'd rather have 2 above knees than lose my arm.
Yeah.
I think I'd lose both legs than lose an arm. I think you take for granted how much you use your hands. It sounds so silly, but I fucking would have hated to have lost a hand.
Yeah, it was watching things like when I was flying back to England and stuff, and I was on the ward with other sort of amputees and seeing the ones who were missing their arms. A good friend of mine, he had a little boy as well at the time, and he said, I can't pick him up. And it's things like that where I was like, I'm glad I kept the arm. Yeah, I was already gutted that I thought I might not play football with my son, and obviously sons now, but I thought I might not play football with them. Whereas the thought of not being able to pick them up and hold them, and that's where I started to more take the positives out of it. Yes, I've lost a leg, but I've still got my arm. So that was a positive sort of straight away, really.
Was it? Sorry, Andy. Sorry. Was it a case of then from 2011 to 2013? It was 2013, wasn't it, when you were discharged from the army? Yeah. What were those 2 years like then? Did you the word PTSD is always mentioned. How were you mentally at that point?
My wife had been on at me throughout the 2 years at Headley to make the most of the facilities that you've got there. I mean, but sort of Andy will tell you, like, you're there with lads that are missing both legs, genitals, their sight, their arms, they're sort of confined to wheelchairs, and there's that. I was bluffing it, I was only missing a leg, so I had a flesh wound. And by comparison, in terms of sort of PTSD and stuff like that, it was like, I have absolutely, one, it didn't happen in Afghanistan, which was obviously a big thing at the time, and it's only a leg. So I've got absolutely no right to say that I'm not doing fine. And also, during my time at Headley, the regiment had deployed again. They'd gone on Herrick 16 back out to Afghan. So whilst I was there, grenadiers started to filter through that were being injured. So I more saw it as, I need to be a good sort of role model. I need to lead by example for them. So them coming along almost sort of took my mind off myself and my own rehabilitation to just getting myself walking, getting myself running, all this sort of stuff to sort of lead by example for them. So that probably helped me. So I didn't personally feel like I struggled mentally throughout Headley, because I just had that perspective that there's so many, you only have to sort of sit in a TV room to see that how many people here are worse off than I am.
It's so funny hearing you speak that it's, you served in Iraq, you've served in Afghan, you've done Kosovo, you've done so much in the military, but listening to you talk, then it's almost a sense of guilt that, you're there with, even though you've done more than most, and, you've nearly lost your leg through it, albeit a training exercise. The way you're talking, it's almost as if you don't merit your place there, which is bizarre.
Yeah, that's exactly how I felt. I remember one particular thing over at the NAFI at Headley, and some old boys had come to sort of meet and greet and all that. So, where you had your celebrities and all that had come along. And I remember one old boy, and he said, "Oh, Afghan?" I said, No, I was Canada." And he straight away sort of turned to then speak to another lad. And I used to sort of, without sounding disrespectful to lads like yourself who were injured in Afghan, I used to wish that I'd just been blown up in Afghan, just to not. I felt embarrassed that I was that lad that was injured in Canada. So yeah, I sort of almost felt a little bit not worthy of. You had all your help for heroes and all of these people sort of calling you heroes, this, that, and the other, and it's like, well, I was only injured in Canada. So yeah, I definitely felt like a man amongst sort of giants at Headley, I suppose.
It's so sad to me today you say that as well, mate, because you've done far more than I ever done in my career, and the fact that I understand where you're coming from, but the fact that you're there, maybe not feeling worthy, it's absolutely fast. You know what I mean? You deserve to be there more than most. Saying that though, I do know what you mean. I remember seeing guys down there who maybe, there was one guy down there, I think he'd only passed out of training a couple of weeks, and he'd been in an RTA and lost a leg, and people were looking down. I think he was a bit of a gobshite, and he was kind of milking it kind of thing, and people were saying, "Fucking hell, you've been in the army fucking 6 months,
Yeah.
And there's guys there like yourself who've done tours here, there, and everywhere, and you don't feel like you're worthy. Yet there's people who are giving it the big one, and it can be a strange dynamic down there, can't it?
Yeah, it got to the point where you almost feel like, well, no, I'm not going to go back to battalion, but I'm not quite a civilian, and so you start to not resent Headley Court, but it's like, I just want a decision either way. I'm not going anywhere here. I'd got myself walking and stuff like that, and I'd rinsed Headley for all I could in terms of physio, prosthetic care. It's like, I just want to sort of cut them ties now. And at the time, I just wanted out. And yeah, like I suppose because you're around lads that almost need that care more, I almost felt like I was sort of taking a bed and taking up time when, like I said, I was only injured in Canada. So that was more my mindset. I didn't feel like I was struggling, but I more felt, I've got no right to sort of ask for help and that while I'm here, because this only happened in Canada. So I felt like that for a long time, I suppose.
Did that kind of mask maybe any problems that you did have, or have you always found that you've been okay, or was that kind of feeling that I don't really deserve this treatment, was that a kind of mask for maybe issues or problems that would surface later on?
Um, I don't think that really contributed to sort of when I did hit my low point. The biggest low for me. So obviously, like I said, although we'd all ended up scrapping in a car park in Canada before I'd ended up working with those safety staff, they'd saved my life. So I had this debt to them that I could never sort of repay. I suppose they'd literally saved my life, and because of the nature of how I was injured, there was a lot of red tape. So it took years to track down and thank the people that had helped me that day. And through social media, I managed to track down two of the blokes, and one of them, he was the lad that clamped off my artery on the ground at the time. We just had like a bond afterwards. And he used to he'd drive from Llanelli in Wales all the way to Milton Keynes just to sort of come and talk, and we really got close. And but the more we got talking, he was a platoon sergeant, and in the previous tours of Iraq and Afghanistan, he'd lost 5 blokes that he'd treated that hadn't made it, and I was the first lad he'd treated that had lived, and it sort of brought everything to the surface, I think, for him. And he ended up sort of taking his own life in 2016.
Oh.
And that was the beginning of me masking stuff. At the time, that was when I was in strongman, so I opted to sort of bury it and just keep myself busy. But it was always there. So it wasn't really my own sort of way that I was injured that was my sort of downfall. It was what happened to him. That was when I sort of hit a rocky patch.
So interesting you say as well that was happening whilst, on the surface, anyone who followed you on social media and friends and family are looking at you, this absolute beast, standing in a pair of undies on stage.
Yeah.
It's funny, isn't it, social media and how we can mask things and stuff. And, I've shared with Tom and on this podcast, not as bad as what you described then, but when I was going through my real kind of low points of drinking and gambling and relationships breaking down, I was standing on stage, getting, 500 people give me, a standing ovation, and then I would jump in my car and I'd cry all the way home because my life was falling apart. And you just do these crazy things, and again, people see it as an injured soldier. They think you're a hero. They think you're this, wow, you're so inspirational. Whereas inside, I just felt like giving up. It's crazy. I'm guessing similar to yourself.
Yeah. I did the same. I used to I'd been into sort of my boys' school and stuff, and talked in assembly and all these sort of things about strongman and stuff like that, and showing them videos of pulling trucks. And so obviously children were fascinated with that, and they, all of the sort of their friends, used to call us like Optimus Prime and things, and then you get back in your car and you go home, and you're there trying to motivate and G up other people and inspire them, and like you said, your own life is sort of falling apart. And like I said, I'd kept so busy after what had happened to Spence. It's like, well, I've got Worlds to train for, I've got the Arnolds to train for. I just throw myself. It was always the next thing, and I never really savoured the moment of competing. It was just, no, I've got to train for the next thing. I'd come back from the Arnolds in America, have a day off, and then the next day I'm back in the gym training, because I don't want to be in my own thoughts, in my own company. And in that time, I'd actually had like an exploratory operation up at the Queen Elizabeth to cut and cap off my sciatic nerve. I'd always had really sort of hypersensitivity at the back of the stump, so I'd always had windows cut out of the socket. So I jumped at the chance for this operation, and out of the 30 of us that had it, I was the one that it didn't work for. It made my leg horrendous. I was in so much pain, and so I had that. That was something else that I was sort of, like you say, you know, you put your posts up and you think no one wants to hear you struggling. Everyone's telling you how motivating you are. It's like, oh, if you knew. So I had all of that. I had all the pain.
I feel like that, mate. When I was struggling, I was thinking, I can't, cry for help, because who's going to book me for a motivational speaker if the motivational speaker is, needing help?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's gonna jeopardize my reputation as a motivational speaker, which will then affect my finances, will then affect my day-to-day life, will then make me then go worse than I am. So
yeah,
I can't say nothing about it.
yeah. You got all these scenarios in your head of just what'll unfold, and like you said, I'll end up worse. So at that time, my wife is sort of saying, you need to get help, and so I've got, Spencer's in the back of my mind all the time. I can barely put one leg in front of the other. I've got this competition to train for, and I used to drive to Luton Hospital, which is where my prosthetic centre was. And I remember there's just this one bridge by Toddington service station, and I would just think, every time I pass it, it's like, I'm just going to put my foot down. And it wasn't that I didn't want to be here, because obviously I was a dad. Like I just didn't want to be in pain anymore. And you start to feel like a liability. You think, well, I can barely walk. And at that point, I almost think the mentality at Headley actually sort of contributed in a weird way, because there's that, you've got a prosthetic, you should be on it. The prosthetic is what was causing me more pain, but I was too proud to be in a wheelchair or be on crutches. So even though my wife's saying, just go in your wheelchair, like, no, I'm not going in my wheelchair, I've got a prosthetic, that's what that's for. And then you take a step and you're in pain, and another step and you're in more pain. And I wouldn't take pain relief or any tramadol or anything like that. So she can see it from the outside, that why are you doing this to yourself? And then, ultimately it catches up with you. But I think the highs that I've had since I've lost my leg massively outweigh that patch. So yeah, I feel lucky.
It's
Yeah,
so funny hearing you say that. The amount of infections I've had on my leg because I've been too proud to, because I don't own a wheelchair. I was the same as you. This is only a below the knee amputation. I've still got most of my leg. It's only the bottom half of my leg. Why do I need a wheelchair? And the amount of infections I've got on my leg because I've not just took a day off, and I've not just, I've worn it just because I don't want to lose face. And, it's ridiculous, isn't it, when you're sitting here now looking back. But,
Yeah, that leg is making it worse, but your pride and that mindset that they've instilled in you from day one, it won't let you.
I'd worked myself to a point where I could go out in a pair of jeans and, I'm in the gym, so I'm kind of looking okay, and people look at me and they go, wow, Andy's, he's just a normal lad. And I was thinking, I don't want to go out with jeans rolled up on crutches, hopping about. I don't want no one to see me like that again. And so I'd wear the leg, it would make it worse, and then the spiral of depression and all that would just build up again.
Yeah. I don't think my outlook towards crutches really changed until I got into the football. And it was actually, we'd gone away for a football tournament in Germany, and so we was all in a hotel together, and I was watching lads that obviously were sort of through hip amputees from cancer and stuff, that were going down to breakfast in the hotel on a pair of crutches, carrying a plate, carrying a cup of coffee, and still managing to get from there to the table. I was like, wow, like, I've never seen anyone do that on crutches. And then you're not in adapted hotel rooms, so they're just jumping in and out of the shower over the bath, and like, I wouldn't do that. And it was only being around people like that and going, you know what, actually, I can do a lot on crutches. And it was the football that changed my outlook on. I don't need to be on my prosthetic to still have a nice life. But it was, I think, had I not gone into the football and I'd stayed in the strongman or the bodybuilding, I'd have still been adamant I have to be on my leg.
Must be so weird, Tom, you sitting here listening to two amputees.
Yeah, it's, honestly, it's crazy. I mean, if like you just said, it seems obvious. If you're in pain and something's hurt, then like, the obvious choice, the obvious option here is like, maybe you don't think about the losing face as such in terms of like, I'll just go on a wheelchair, or I mean, there is a stigma, isn't there? I mean, we all don't like to talk about it, but there is a stigma when someone's in a wheelchair. Like, it's just, it is what it is. When you see someone in a wheelchair, you especially kids ask questions and how did that happen, and whereas if you're able to keep that, all the tours of Afghan and Iraq and that, that ultimate, that identity that you are, if you try and keep that, but yeah, it's interesting. I mean, from someone who's obviously not been through what you both have been through, and it feels like the stories are so similar. I hear Andy talking all the time about Headley Court. I think I remember seeing, is there that huge hedge or something in Headley Court? I think that's what you have in your presentation, Andy, isn't it?
There's a video of me running to the hedge, and it's the first time I've run as an amputee. And I'm hoping that point in the presentation people are feeling really inspired. And this one time, a little boy put his hand up. He's only aged maybe 6 or 7. And I was thinking he was going to ask me, like, what's it like to run with one leg, and could you run faster than me, and anything like that. And the little boy said, "Sir, how tall is that hedge?" It was great. But yeah, I've got, like you say, just some great memories from Headley Court as well. It was, I think it was a place where, and I'll be honest, I'm not really patriotic, and I don't I do sometimes believe in it, but the way we hear in the news, maybe like this great British pride and this, I felt real pride at Headley Court. I did, proud of being in the military, proud of seeing people like yourself and like, other injured soldiers who've been through things. It did make me feel really proud to think, wow, there's a lot of grit and determination in this building,
It's infectious. When I compare, having met obviously civilians that have sort of had injuries and stuff like that, and through the football and strongman, and two very different experiences of rehabilitation. I was surrounded by blokes all with a sense of humour, a good outlook on life, relieved that they're still alive, so they're taking the positives from everything. And that was infectious, to be around people that, going down to PT every morning and doing circuits, and it was just, you had that tough love from day one. And I think that was the biggest thing for Headley Court. I think you're just, it's such an infectious environment that if one lad in your room is having a down day, the other 3 are having a good day. And whereas I think the lads I've spoken to through football, it's a lonely sort of road back to walking and stuff, and they didn't have those people around them when they needed them to pick them up. Whereas that was something, I think, sporting wise especially, definitely sets you up at Headley.
Man, I remember Harry Redknapp came down to visit the lads. He was crying. He broke down in tears, Harry Redknapp, once he'd seen the guys. And it's one bit of advice I always give as well. Again, a lot of people ask me after the presentations, if they're looking at maybe getting an amputation. And I say, I don't want you to be fooled into listening to my rehabilitation story, because yours would not be like that. I say exactly what you said, Mark. I say I was in a room where it was impossible for me to feel sorry for myself, because there was a guy there with no legs, a guy there who's blind, a guy there who's burnt. So maybe when you have your amputation, you'll be in a hospital ward with a 75-year-old guy who's got dementia, an 80-year-old guy who's got lung cancer, a 60-year-old guy who's got, it's a very different rehab process when you're in a room with those guys or those guys. And again, you hit the nail on the head. It's about the surroundings, isn't it, that Headley Court can bring in. And sport is massive for that. I mean, you spoke about your lows that you had. you've had some pretty some pretty big sporting highs as well.
Yeah, I think my mentality from once I accepted I wasn't going to be in the forces anymore. You hear so much of, well, you're not going to be able to do this, you're not going to be able to do that, and it was like the stubbornness sort of kicks in, and you're like, well, I'll show you I can. And I've got a particular photo of when I was in hospital. My little boy sat on the bed with me, and I'd dropped to 61 kilos, so around about 9 stone, where I'd been nil by mouth and that. So I was in and out of theatre all the time, and even when I could eat, that metallic taste from the morphine, so I didn't want to eat, and I was wasting away. And some lads from the company had come up to see me and walked straight past me in the hospital bed. And it was only that I was wearing the rifle company's T-shirt, the company that I served in, that they knew it was me, because I was the only grenadier up there at the time. And it was the fact that I looked that ill, that sort of malnourished and weak and feeble in my eyes, that what's the ultimate way of spinning that on its head? And I'd spent a lot of time looking into amputees in America that had stepped on stage as bodybuilders, and I'd had a look in England, and there was one particular competition over here in Margate that included a disability class, and just on a whim, it was all right, I'm going to enter. I've got 6 months, I'm going to enter, and it was like, I'm going to prove sort of that it can be done, and yeah, like that was the sort of catalyst really for.
And prior to your injury, were you a big guy? Were you into the weights and stuff? And
only really on the tours, because you know, between patrols and stuff like that, you got a lot of time to kill, haven't you? So yeah, we had all the improvised 6-foot pickets and ammo tins and all that sort of stuff. But no, to be fair, like in camp,
I mean, I'm just picturing you. I mean, I'm sure people will go and check out your Instagram after this podcast, but I mean, I'm trying to picture that Mark before. I mean, you look like fucking like an Adonis. I mean, I'm trying to think, what did you look like beforehand? You know, were you
nothing like that, mate. Like, I tell you what, the army would be much more effective if they ate like that. It's when you think of the sort of the slop that you eat in a cookhouse compared to,
yeah,
you know, how I ate as a bodybuilder and as a strongman, the army would be far more effective and robust if they fed their soldiers like that.
So both you know, both again, stories are so similar in terms of, and there's so many stories that here on this podcast about how sport has helped so many people. You know, Andy with the running, yourself with, you know, the bodybuilding. It's you know, and how many probably ex-servicemen who've been injured, or, you know, regardless, you know, we had a guy who was in a coach accident coming back from Bestival. You know, sadly his friend lost his life, and he's still injured, and how swimming helped him massively. So, you know, it's such an important thing within people who are injured in terms of how sport can help people. Yeah.
I definitely think in all sports, but particularly sort of bodybuilding, it gave you that discipline. You had a deadline. I'd entered that competition, so I had a deadline. I have to do myself justice. So the only person I'm going to let down on that stage is myself. It gave me that discipline. You have to eat this at this time on this day, and routine, which was something when I first come out of Headley Court, I early on really started to sort of miss just having some structure. So in a way at the time, bodybuilding ticked all of that. It was like, I've got a goal, I've got something I have to be ready for. It was like sort of training to go on Junior Brecon. You know, you have to be at a certain point to go on that course, and stepping up on stage was no different.
And having it, I think it even transfers into not only sport, but I think, you know, they don't have to, you know, people don't have to be shot 6 or 7 times. They might be going through, especially now with what's going on at the moment, through certain bouts of depression and things like that, it's, you know, that you stepping on stage, you entering that competition, it's just like a project packaged up. You know, you mentioned discipline there and having routine. It could be anything. It could be, doesn't have to be standing on stage, you know, in strongman. It could be setting up a business, or, you know, anything that relates to a project that brings in those three things that you talked about, which is discipline, routine, and structure, you know, plays such a massive part of things. And, you know, I know how much it helped Andy as well with and I think obviously you might be trying it again, Andy.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I realised through last year was just how I didn't have those things, you know. And so this year I've started got back into the running again, and want to try and break my record again in the summer. And already, I mean, what are we? 11 days into the year, I've been on 4 runs already this year, and I already feel more focused and more, you know, I've got the bit between my teeth again, and I'm ready to take on the year. Whereas when you don't have that kind of routine or that goal, things can quickly just pass you by and sweep you up and throw you down a road that's going nowhere, and your life can go nowhere fast.
Yeah, and I suppose that's particularly last year. That's what I was sort of worried about with, you know, I'd lost the gyms, I'd lost football, I'd lost sort of going down the pub. You know, it's so right. I need some sort of routine in place from day one if I'm going to sort of come out the other side of this. All right. So I did. I got in my walks, my cardio. I got in my weight training sort of at home, and I had a timetable written out at home from Monday to Friday. And I think it's having that structure and that routine. You know, you don't just have to be military to sort of be able to put that in place. Like I felt like I sort of sailed through last year just because I had those few things, and I set a goal for each. We didn't know how long those lockdowns and so on were going to go on for. It's like, this is my goal, so I come out the other side of this in this condition, and it broke it down into sort of being achievable.
I mean, how did that first bodybuilding competition go?
It couldn't have gone any better, to be honest. So I was in a disability class. So again, at that point, I was still very much, I have to be on my prosthetic. So I didn't want to enter a wheelchair class, which at the time was quite big in bodybuilding. They had a pro category in the Olympia and everything. But there was very little for ambulant disabled people that wanted to stand up on stage. If I was going to do bodybuilding, I wanted to stand as Arnold Schwarzenegger would have stood there in the 70s. So the disability class was myself at the time and 2 lads with cerebral palsy, which in itself was eye-opening, because aside from being with lots and lots of amputees, I hadn't really been around people with different sort of disabilities at that point. So it took me back a little bit. The night before the competition, we were getting our spray tans and stuff, which was sort of comical in itself, because I couldn't have my prosthetic on because it would all sort of ruin the leg. And so I'm balancing on one leg in the nude with a sock on my cock for 15 minutes, like while I'm getting sprayed and drying off. And these 2 lads come in with cerebral palsy, and we got talking, and they were in my class, and it was like, I am not disabled compared, you know, am I a bit of a fraud competing in this class sort of thing? You know, those lads are properly sort of, they've been like that from birth. You know, and then my wife was sort of, you know, this is what you've worked hard for these last sort of 6 months. And come the day, we were the first category out, and it was a sold out sort of theatre down in Margate, and they'd called us out, and we did our sort of quarter turns and stuff, and everyone was cheering. And then one at a time, you come back out to your routine, so you pick your choice of music, and I think I'd picked Shoot to Thrill by AC/DC. And just as you're about to come out, they sort of say, you know, this is sort of Mark Smith from Milton Keynes, these X-Forces, blah, blah, blah. And then the moment the sort of MC had said that, everyone in the theatre stood up and started clapping, and to the point where, you know, you could barely hear your music. And I was like, wow, this is that adrenaline rush that I've been craving since Herrick. I love this. And then, yeah, you do your routine, you come back out, you do a bit of a pose down with the other lads, and then they call you out in your sort of reverse placings. Third come out, second come out, and yeah, I'd won my first competition. So
What an amazing feeling that would have been, man. Fucking hell.
yeah, I was on a real high. As soon as I come off stage, I was like, I want to enter another one, and I didn't have to sort of wait long, to be honest, because obviously through social media and stuff like that, my routine had sort of found its way online, and it caught the eyes of the head of the NPC, which was the biggest bodybuilding federation in America at the time, and he'd sent me a tweet saying you should come out and compete in America. We've got an adaptive class, and I sort of showed my wife, was like, one of the lads is taking the piss, like. And then so I got back to him, and he was like, no, I'm deadly serious. Like, you know, we'd love to sort of have you out. And so, yeah, a couple of days later, I started sort of training, booked my flights over to Texas, my hotel and all that, booked all my turn-in, got everything done. And come to March, I was on my way out to the Phil Heath Classic in Houston.
Wow.
And that was...
If anyone, well, people are obviously listening to the podcast, just pause this podcast and just go and look at the absolute beast. And it's amazing, man. Honestly, you're in incredible shape, man. It's just like, wow. I mean, how strong were you? And I know it's not about strength in these things, but, you know, what are you kind of benching? What are you deadlifting? What are these things you're doing? When
I was in strongman, those sort of questions, at my heaviest, at my sort of peak, I could bench press 175 kilos comfortably. I was deadlifting.
Man, I done 120 in the gym the other day. One rep, I was like, fucking felt like Arnie himself.
Oh yeah, I haven't got that. I don't think I've got that in the locker anymore. But at the time,
170, fucking hell.
Yeah. I just, it became addictive. I found it quite sort of therapeutic to be in the gym, and every day was about, you know, my mindset stepping on stage was, I'm missing a leg, but I quite like that I'm going to be critiqued for everything I'm able to train, everything I've got left. The leg, I can't do anything about that, but what I have got, I can do something about. So I was like, I'm going to step up there in the best possible condition I can be in. And I quite like that in bodybuilding, is I was judged for what I was able to train. And that was quite sort of satisfying at that point, and a big confidence boost. If you can stand in front of thousands of people in a pair of posing trunks with a prosthetic leg and be critiqued.
I think most guys would say that, you know, with two legs. I mean, Tom, it take you some balls to stand with.
Too right, mate. I ain't entering any of that at the moment. Fucking hell.
I've done naked bar in the past, so it was. I'd had more clothes on stage, so I was all right.
I've heard a lot about this naked bar. Fucking hell.
Last podcast, they explained to Tom what naked bar was. He couldn't quite believe it.
Yeah,
I just couldn't.
Naked bar.
I just thought to myself that if you're in any, if we were in Milton Keynes in a bar in Milton Keynes and someone just shouts naked bar, like, surely not.
Oh yeah, even now, like it takes me a bit longer to get undressed, but yeah, it's like a call to arms.
It is like a good, yeah, mate. Was it 2017 then that you retained the title of Britain's Strongest Man?
Yeah, so
yeah,
2015 was when I did the Phil Heath bodybuilding competition, and from that I ended up. It was just like a whirlwind of like surreal experiences. I ended up in sort of Muscle and Fitness, Men's Health magazine, Flex, all of these magazines like around the world, where, you know, I grew up as a boy sort of seeing Arnold Schwarzenegger and Lou Ferrigno in them, and now I've got 6 pages in Men's Health magazine, and it was just a whirlwind. I got invited to guest pose on the pro stage at Body Power in front of thousands of people, and it was just, I'm just going to lap this up while it lasts, because I'll be old news tomorrow, sort of thing. So any opportunity that comes my way, I'm going to take. And off the back of that, if this can sort of motivate some people, if people can sort of see what I'm doing, whether they're amputees or not, or veterans or not, hopefully they'll sort of draw something from the, what I'm doing with myself. But the strongman come about at the end of the bodybuilding season. I'd had a lot of months of dieting, so I'd started sort of eating a bit more comfortably, and I'd noticed my strength was sort of going up with it. And it coincided with an open day to try strongman, pulling a truck, lifting some Atlas stones, pressing some logs, deadlifting some cars, and
just flip.
I know.
Yeah.
Just
and
what is it? Explain the car thing.
I
don't mean to like jump about, but we've got to.
No, that's fine. So to deadlift a car, it will be the two back wheels will be up on a frame with a deadlifting bar at the front of it, and you're at the boot of the car basically, and you have to lift the car off the floor as many times as you can. So the whole of the rear end has to completely clear the floor.
So that'd have been none for me and you, Tom.
Yeah.
I loved that event.
What is the weight? Like, can they put a weight on the back? Do you know rough weight of what that is?
So a car is around about 300 kilos.
In the back of that car is about 300 kilos. Yeah.
Yeah. So the boot will have been full of weights and stuff as well. So it wasn't just an empty car.
Okay. No.
Yeah. They don't make it easy, but I'd had this training day, and the organizer of Britain's Strongest Disabled Man was there, and he said, we've got Britain's coming up in 6 weeks' time. Why don't you enter? And I'd love watching strongman at Christmas times growing up and stuff, and I thought, there's no way I'm of that level. And I got home and I said to my wife, I've had a mega day. Like, I've lifted Atlas stones for the first time ever. I'd never even touched one. And she said, why don't you enter it? And I was like, oh, yeah, go on. Like, I'll do it just on a whim again. And so I turned up on the day of my first competition, which was Britain's in 2016. And there were 23 in my class. And I was like, if I can come top 10, I'll be over the moon. And my boys had come down, and the only thing they were interested in watching was me pull a truck, and it was the first event. And it just started to rain before my pull, which sort of added to sort of how difficult it was going to be. And then my boys pull out this banner, and they're like, oh, come on, Daddy. And as I sort of sat down to be harnessed up to sort of face this truck, just all of the last few years just went into that moment. And I won the truck pull, and I found myself sort of on the top of the leaderboard at my first strongman competition. And as the day went on, I won the car deadlift, I won the Hercules hold, and I ended up winning my first ever strongman competition and being Britain's Strongest Disabled Man in 2016.
Wow.
So I then went off to the Worlds, which, to be fair, my first year I was out of my depth. Those lads were phenomenal. Everything almost doubled in weight, but it was a learning curve. I took the positives from it. Went away, trained with some pro strongmen, picked their brains, ate more like a strong man. I sort of lost that bodybuilding physique, and then I went off to the Arnold's off the back of that. So the Arnold's is a coming together of the 10 strongest in the world. So myself sort of winning Britain's, I qualified for it, and I went and won the Arnold's. So the Arnold's is like held in sort of the equivalent to like the NEC. You've got 100,000 people walking around while it's open, and all of these people are sort of coming over and watching what you're doing. And so I won the Arnold's, and then a few weeks later I had Britain's, and I, like you said, the 2017 one, I managed to retain that title. And
that is some discipline for a couple of years to be just, eating what you're having to eat and working out, and that is.
Yeah.
It just I'd really got the bug for it then, and I suppose I sort of set myself up, like, because it had gone so well from the very first competition. There's only one way after that sort of thing if you don't put the effort in. And everything I've done, I've tried to live that lifestyle and give every ounce of what I've got. And bodybuilding, I got the help of a bodybuilder that had been at Mr. Universe numerous times and stuff. It's like, I want the best person to help me. I want to pick his brains. I want to do exactly as I will do whatever you tell me to do. I will live the life you tell me to live. And I've done the same in strongman. Picked people's brains, your Eddie Halls, your Lawrence Chalets, and started to eat like a strongman. I'd invested in all of my own kit and equipment, stones and stuff, and just lived that lifestyle. And I really started to sort of feel like I was making progress, and went back to the Worlds. The Worlds in 2017 was at the Olympic Stadium in London, and I was the only athlete to win 2 events. I won the truck pull and the Atlas Stones that day, but my shoulder, the gunshot to my shoulders, seemed to be a more noticeable setback in strongman than bodybuilding. So anything to do with endurance holds, like a Thor's hammer, I was useless. That's where that really sort of held me back. I came last on the Thor's hammer at that Worlds, which is what cost me winning it. But it was just,
What's so amazing and so inspirational in a way is that we forgot you got shot in the shoulder.
I was just about to say that, yeah.
yeah, it didn't really sort of affect us, apart from the symmetry when it came to bodybuilding, because my 2 shoulders were slightly different. And obviously my legs were different in symmetry, but I just tried, I could mask it in bodybuilding, not push my good shoulder so much, so that they were at least even. Whereas strongman, there was such a noticeable difference. So whenever it came to endurance holds and stuff like that, I knew I was up against it.
I'm surprised, Mark, that you weren't more you weren't cautious of not actually like having a sustained injury. Lifting that amount of and not having an arm that potentially causes you pain like it did with your leg.
I mean, I have had my fair share of injuries in strongman. I've torn both biceps. I've torn my pec. I've passed out with a 130 kilo Atlas stone on my lap. Yeah, I've passed out. I was deadlifting 420 kilos, and I passed out in the gym. And I loved that. Not only was I sort of proving what could be done as an amputee, but by this point, it was as a human being. No longer just, I didn't have that limit then of being an amputee. It was just, I was now doing things that able-bodied friends were envious of. I went and set a world record for pulling 2 trucks at the same time on Brands Hatch racetrack. And these were all things, they gave me that adrenaline rush that I was craving. And I loved competition. I loved testing myself against the best in the world, and it brought the best out in me physically. And I lived to sort of improve on everything I was doing. And
it's exactly the same though. That, like Tom said, how mine and your journeys are a bit similar. I got to a point where I wasn't interested in being the fastest amputee in the world. That was just a byproduct. I got a buzz from being fitter than all of my mates. I got a buzz from people saying to me, "Oh, okay, yeah, you're the fastest, one-legged man in the world, but how fast does a one-legged man run? Is it an hour, 50 minutes?" And then I was like, "No, 37."
yeah,
What? Wait, fucking one leg. And so it was, okay, it wasn't beating Mo Farah, but it was beating most people most people on a Sunday morning, if you like. And again, I think maybe that's similar mindsets, but I wasn't bothered about the disabled aspect anymore. It was like, I'm going to beat people with 2 legs now.
yeah. I often, I could pick up on the difference. There wasn't many veterans, or if any, if I can recall, in strongman. And there was always that air of caution that they had of safety, where you'd said about sort of injuring yourself. And for each Atlas stone, they would put the brakes on the wheelchair and almost be a little bit cautious. Whereas in that moment, I had no concern for my health or safety. It was just about living in that I have to get this Atlas stone across to that other barrel. So I suppose similar to a contact in Afghan, you know, on the patrols, your mind's thinking of everything back home, but the moment it goes kinetic, you forget about that and you focus on what's in front of you. And strongman sort of did that as well when it come to pulling a truck. And at that moment, all that mattered in my life was pulling that truck quicker than anybody else. And I quite liked that adrenaline rush that came with that. And yeah, being able to call yourself one of the best in the world, to have a world record, to think of all the disabled people in Great Britain, I'm the strongest. And it was just, I started to see then that I'm quite lucky with the things that I've got to do.
It begs the question, mate. Why give it up? Because I know you've gone on to now football, now amputee football. Why? I mean, if it was me, mate, I'd have a poster on in the background on your wall there. I'd have that on saying, Britain's disabled strongest man. What made you kind of, trim down a bit and go for the football?
After the Arnolds in 2018, so after Britain's in 17, I went out to the Arnolds the following year and I retained that title as well. And at that point, I could feel I was good enough to be the best in the world. I'd won that Arnold's comfortably. I'd won 4 out of the 5 events. And I knew I'd worked on all my weaknesses enough to place sort of middle of the pack, so I'd get enough points. And I knew that year that I had a really, really good chance of winning the world's strongest. And a couple of weeks after the Arnolds, there was the first England strongest, which was at Brands Hatch, and I won that. And so everything felt phenomenal competing wise. But where I'd lived that life of a strongman, I'd sort of ballooned up to 20 stone. So I was at the weight limit for the leg that I was on, the prosthetic. I'd had that operation in 2017 on the sciatic nerve that hadn't worked. I'd lost my friend after my very first Britons. He sort of took his life 2 weeks after that very first competition. So a lot of my time in strongman was channeling that. And I'd always been one of the blokes in battalion that I'd always be out on the piss and stuff. Like I like being around the blokes. I was a bit of a Jack the Lad, I suppose. Like I was sort of a drama merchant and getting sort of put on adjutants and stuff like that. So I loved being a bit of a clown, and I missed all of that. Strongman was everyone against everyone, and you're an individual. And I found I was spending more and more time in my own company, and so a lot more time in my own thoughts and a lot more time in pain. And I was able to mask the sort of physical pain I was in with my leg during competing, because like I said, all that mattered was pulling that truck, lifting that stone. Whereas it was away from competing, day-to-day life, that it was a real sort of hindrance. And I'd gone out to Russia for the World Cup, and I could barely walk. I'd done it on a whim, and 2 days after I got back from Russia, we were flying out on sort of the dream family holiday to Florida. And I was still in that mindset of, I don't need a wheelchair, I don't need crutches, I'm on my prosthetic. And I single-handedly ruined the family's holiday because of my stubbornness. I wouldn't sort of take the leg off, and where my children would be sort of wanting to run off excited to go to the next roller coaster and so on, they'd be waiting half an hour because I'd have to stop 3 or 4 times at benches to adjust my leg. And so it was really having a knock-on effect at home. And one particular day we'd gone to Blizzard Beach, I think it was, a water park in Florida.
Brilliant. Love Blizzard Beach.
Yeah, I've got some experience, I suppose.
I love that. Cracking.
I was used to at theme parks and stuff being an above knee, not being allowed on many roller coasters and stuff, whereas America seemed to be a bit more lenient. So I had to transfer into a wheelchair. I didn't have a waterproof leg at the time, so we'd gone up in this chairlift thing up to the top of this sort of big slide, and all my family had gone down, and then the lifeguard had swapped over, and the one that had come on had told me that I couldn't go down. So I'm now stuck at the top of this slide on my own, no phone, no family with me, sort of baking hot sort of Florida summer heat, in a wheelchair that was it was a water wheelchair, so you couldn't wheel it yourself. You needed someone to push you. And I was like, I'm literally a proper disabled person right now. I'm stuck. And I spent 45 minutes sat at the top of that slide, waiting for my wife to sort of obviously figure out where I was and come and find me. And she had to sort of take me by the hand down the sort of wet steps because there was no chairlift back down. And I felt sort of, I just wanted the ground to swallow me up at that point. And it was the buses that used to take you from the hotel to the theme parks and stuff. Because I was in a wheelchair that day, I had to, in front of everyone, be wheeled on, strapped in. Like, I quite liked on a prosthetic leg because I was at eye level with people and stuff. I didn't feel disabled. Whereas that moment at the top of that slide and being on the bus in a wheelchair and all strapped in front of everyone, and they had to fold away some seats, so people were having to stand up to make room for me. And I hated every part of Florida, really. And we'd gone back to the hotel. Obviously, I was sort of embarrassed with everything that had sort of gone on that day, and that was when it just everything come to the surface in the hotel room, and I just broke down. And I said, I don't want to be here anymore. Not just Florida, just full stop. I'm in so much pain. I need help. And so I phoned my casualty officer from the Grenadiers from Florida. It was like, can you get me some counselling sorted for when I get back? And my wife had sort of said, look, you're competing 2-3 times a year. So for the other 360 odd days, this weight that helps you pull a truck is a hindrance on your day-to-day life. And is it worth it? And I'd had in my head that if I didn't win the Worlds, that I was a failure. And I'd had it in my head that I wanted to make my boys proud, to be able to go into school and say, my dad is the world's strongest disabled man. Just that I know I'd beaten those same people at the Arnolds, but it didn't have the same title. And she said, the boys don't care if you're Britain's strongest, the world's. They don't care if you've come last in a competition. They just want sort of to spend time with you. And so I made the decision there and then that I was due after America to go out to Norway to do the Worlds. And I was like, I'm going to pull out and I'm going to get myself help. So I sat down with my wife when we got back to England, and we wrote a list of positives and negatives, all of the sort of things that were sort of getting me to that low, and all of the things that I missed, all the things I still wanted to achieve. And one of the big things that I missed was being a part of a team, being around people, being on a football pitch. And I'd stopped going out on the piss and stuff like that. I just lived that sort of life of a strongman. So I'd cut off all my friends, I suppose. I'd lived a very sort of isolated life for a couple of years, hell-bent on trying to win the Worlds. So yeah, when we sort of sat, it was like, right, I'm going to look into football, see if I can sort of get back on a football pitch. I'm going to sort of meet up with some lads from battalion and sort of have a bit of a social, and I'm going to lose a bit of weight because obviously that's sort of hindering me. I'm going to get help for the pain that I'm in, so go to prosthetics, and I went and got a private socket which would sort of accommodate me better. I ended up going on Dr. Christian's special clinics on television to try some alternative treatment for my leg. And then once one thing went well for me, which it hadn't obviously in my personal life for a couple of years, then something else went well and something else went well. And I got this new socket. I had these Botox injections on the program that completely numbed the leg for a few months. And so now I was able to put a leg on and I wasn't in pain. So then I could start losing the strongman weight. Then once I was sort of light enough, I could get onto a pair of crutches and I could try playing football. And so everything bit by bit got better and better. And yeah, a large part of that came from that conversation with my wife and the counselling. Rather than attending counselling because someone else had told me to, I was there because I knew I needed it. And I think that helped me take it a lot more seriously.
Your wife sounds like a legend as well.
Sorry?
Your wife sounds like a legend as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, even before I'd lost my leg, like, why she stuck around, I don't know, mate. But, yeah, I'm lucky she did. Obviously, I think there was almost an ultimatum that, you know, if you do still choose to carry on with strongman, like, you sort of do it on your own in a way, because I was sort of put in, you know, I was no fun to be around because away from being in the gym and away from pulling trucks and stuff, I was miserable. I'd get up and I'd look at my leg sat next to the bed and it's like, I've got to put that on. And then each step got worse and worse and worse. So yeah, from her perspective, it's like, why are you doing this? Like, we don't care if you're the world's strongest. And that sort of,
Fuck me, mate. I'd be happy with Britain's, man. That's
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, to be fair, before strongman, if someone had said you'd be Britain's strongest, I'd have snapped their hand off for it. But
yeah.
Yeah, some things.
What are the goals with the amputee football then? Is there a goal, or is that just now just a social, just the enjoyment side of things, or are you setting any big goals for that? Are you? Or
to be honest, at first it was more the social aspect of it I enjoyed, and then my very first game, I joined Peterborough United early 2019, and the realisation of how good some people are on crutches and the speed that they were moving at, and it was like, I quite liked that in bodybuilding and strongman I'd been at the top of the pile for so long, and here I was in football and I looked at myself as I am the bottom. So I liked the challenge that I wasn't at the top being sort of picked off. I had sort of lots of people to sort of aspire to sort of try and be like, and so I quite liked that it was a big learning curve for me. And although what started off as a social thing, you know, I quickly sort of found that competitive streak again, and I'd lost the weight, and I played at centre half that first season because I couldn't really move. I was still sort of 18, 19 stone and on a pair of crutches. So I was more just the sweeper that got in the way. Yeah, everyone else did the running for me. I was there to sort of do the physical stuff. But I mean, it went really well. We won the national title in that first season, and I got voted Player of the Year by the players, which,
wow,
to have come from wanting to drive into a wall on the M1 and feeling very sort of isolated and depressed, to then sort of win the recognition and respect of other people, like, that meant a massive amount at that point to have gone from that low to, you know, that wasn't, the manager didn't pick it, the squad picked their player of the year. So that meant a lot, that, you know, I'd had a positive impact on everyone in that team. And then, now it's more just, I think my days of sort of titles and stuff like that individually, I've done that. Now it's just about enjoying being on a football pitch.
Mate, I've got a feeling there'll be a podcast part 2 when he's fucking won the World Cup or something like that.
Yeah, mate, I've got some friends in the England squad, and obviously every lad that grows up sort of loving football and dreams of pulling on an England shirt. But I think age is a big factor now. I mean, the realisation when I started playing amputee football that some of the lads in the team were born after I joined the army. That's when I realised I'm on borrowed time here.
Yeah, the amputee football, mate, it's incredible, isn't it? Some of the things that people can do with a pair of crutches on one leg, it's fucking insane.
Yeah, it's one of the things. Although, like, I was upset in hospital that I'd lost my leg and I knew I'd lost my military career, the thought of not playing football again, it was always there. I always think at some point I was going to come back to playing football. And I mean, that first couple of games, I was still swinging the leg out that wasn't there, and like whereas now, yeah, I've joined West Bromwich Albion this season, and I drive up there every Monday for sort of 2 hours, and I'm gutted when training's finished and stuff. Like, I absolutely love being on a football. I love everything about it. Like, you know, if they said to us, "You got a 12-hour training session," I'd do it with a smile on my face. Like, and I think that's the biggest difference between this and strongman, is I'm genuinely sort of happy and comfortable and not in pain. And I'm around sort of lads with a good sense of humour. They all love football. So,
who do you support, Mark?
I'm an MK Dons fan, mate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the fact that you haven't jumped, glory on supporting one of the bigger clubs, mate. It's nice that you stuck to your team then.
Yeah, no, I mean, I live 5 minutes from the stadium, and when they found out I'd lost my leg, they got in touch, and they invited me to carry the match ball out on their Armed Forces Day.
That's cool.
And that coincided with being my first full day on a prosthetic leg. So, yeah, I carried the ball out against Rochdale in front of 7,000 people on a walking stick, on a KX. It was raining, and
a lot of pressure that, mate.
But yeah, in terms of the club itself, they've been fantastic with me. I've done that a couple of times now, and they sorted me out a season ticket that just after I lost my leg. And
fucking hell, mate! Liverpool need to pull it. Season ticket.
Yeah. So, yeah, mate, I love it. Like, football's been one of the biggest parts of being able to pick myself back up. So yeah, I just want to sort of enjoy it for as long as I can now.
Hey, I've really enjoyed this podcast, mate. It's
even halfway through, I was thinking, mate, you're such a good storyteller, and it's been mega.
I mean, we're already like 2 hours 12 minutes in. You know.
Sorry.
You tell your story so well, though, and it's so compelling, and I just want to sit here and listen to you more and more, mate. And the fact that, obviously, like we mentioned at the start, you're able to document it now in a book as well. And all the money raised is going to your friend's charity. Mate, you're a top guy, mate. What you've been through, what you've done, your attitude in life, it's a privilege to have had you on, mate. I'm just gutted we couldn't do it in person, but I'm sure we will in the future. But mate, it's just so inspiring, mate. And you know what, actually, Mark, you back me up, actually, because I say to Tom all the time, and I say, I fucking hate giving to charity when it's, I'm doing a fucking I want to do a parachute jump, come and raise money. I'm like, that's enjoyable. I'm like, I want people to push themselves, because I say all the time, I know some fucking cool people who fucking push themselves and push themselves hard. And so every time when I moan about this, I can just go listen to Mark's podcast, because you are someone who I, since being injured, I've people like yourself. You're around those people who've got that mindset, who can push themselves despite the injuries, the disability, and can live the life you live, mate. And it's why we started the podcast, to speak to people like yourself, Mark. So
Yeah,
I can't thank you enough.
Thank you, mate. That's obviously, especially from someone like yourself. Like I said, I've followed everything you've done with interest, sort of, the last few years, and that's why, when you messaged about coming on, it's like the chance to sort of get to sort of speak with yourself and yourself, Tom, and I've been listening to your podcasts, and I think now more than ever, people need sort of picking up. We're able to
100%.
sort of do that with ourselves and give ourselves a goal and a target, and I've sort of realised over the last few months the importance that sort of our own experiences can play on other people. So I want to sort of, every opportunity I've got to try and hopefully sort of have a positive impact on people, then that's sort of worth sort of giving your time for.
You have on me massively, and also just your open and honesty and your humbleness as well about the dark times you've been through as well, because you said, mate, I've been through them myself, and no doubt there's so many people who are going through them now, and to hear someone like you say, a big strong guy like yourself, who can say, look, I've been through them too. It's what people need to hear, mate, especially in these strange times. So again, mate, and I'm sure the podcast will inspire, and also the book as well. And again, mate, just want to say thanks again.
Yeah, likewise, mate. What was the name of the book, just for people, very last time?
I called the book Strength of Mind. So I've put it up on Amazon, and like I said, all of the profits. So once the cost of printing the book and posting the book is gone, every other penny is going to Aidan's Funds, which is a children's cancer charity which was set up after our friends lost their little boy Aidan to cancer. So a lot of their work is sort of supporting families in a similar situation, and sort of taking gifts and things to keep the children occupied whilst they're on the cancer ward. And I know that the book's been out 4 weeks now, and it's raised just over £2,000 for them.
Amazing.
Which they've said as a charity will get them through 2021. So that's been the most rewarding part of writing the book, is being able to, the fact that people want to read the things that I've done, and the fact that every book sort of contributes towards sort of being able to help other children.
Oh, mate, it's incredible.
I'm going to be buying it in the morning anyway now, mate. So honestly, mate, and listen, no doubt we'll stay in touch now, mate. But again, you're a huge inspiration, and thanks again, mate.
Cheers, mate. Thank you so much, mate.